And we are live! Hey! Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. We've got our in-person live studio audience. We've got our audience on Zoom, the millions of people are watching on Zoom today. It's great to see you all here. 1 week to go before Purim, so possibly a good moment to mention that there will be no Lunch and Learn next week. Also probably a good time to mention that we were getting closer and closer to that key topic that I said we were going to talk about in Lunch and Learn, and we're not going to get there this week because the individual who really wanted to be here for that one is not here this week. So we will keep on going as we do. A couple of words though first on Parshat Vayikra, the beginning of the book of Vayikra, the third book of the Torah, and we shift from the narrative. We shift from the narrative, and we move into talking primarily about the sacrifices. About the sacrifices, the korbanot. What's that? We'd understand it. We'd understand how it all works. Instead, it becomes very obscure and it becomes very foreign. It becomes very foreign to us. It's actually interesting. Were any of you on Parsha Pearls last night? No. Very naughty of you. So last night I was telling a story about a rabbi in America, I believe. A number of years ago, he received a phone call on behalf of a group of Korean Christian ministers. And were you on last night, Martin?
No, I saw a little bit.
You saw a little bit. So he got this phone call from a group of Korean Christian ministers that they wanted to come and experience a Shabbat morning service. And the rabbi was open to it. No reason why not. But he had a few concerns. Like these people come walking in. What's the community going to think? So he felt like there needed to be a bit of time to explain what was going to happen. But he was also nervous about how they were going to react. Because when they walk in and they see everyone talking and they see the children running around, and he was concerned what the appearances would be like. And he was concerned that they wouldn't have a clue what was flying. So this really happened. So he said to them, pardon me? He also came on Simchat Torah. And he wrote about it in his diary. So the rabbi said, I'm happy for you guys to come, but I want you to come beforehand on a different day so I can talk to you about the synagogue, talk to you about the service, talk to you about what you're going to experience so that you're not caught completely off guard. So they came probably a week or two beforehand, and he brings them into the synagogue and he shows them around and he shows them the ark and he shows them the Ner Tamid and he shows them the scrolls and he shows them the Siddur, the Bimah, the Chumash, everything. He explains it all to them. And then he opens the floor for questions. And a hand shot up straight away. And the question that this guy had was, but where do you do the sacrifices? Where do you do the sacrifices? And the rabbi was completely taken aback. He's been asked about kippot. He's been asked about tzitzit. He's done a lot of these tours of the shul. This was the first time anyone had asked him this question. And he was really taken aback. And he said, well, ever since the temple was destroyed a couple of thousand years ago, we don't do animal sacrifices. And the guy didn't believe him. And the rabbi was thinking, like, what do you think? I've got a basement filled with animals, and when you're not looking, that's where we go and do it. And the group would not relent. They would not back down. They were so convinced that the Jews still did animal sacrifices. And the more that they were talking, it started to emerge. You see, for them, as Christians, there had to be an intermediary between the sinners and God. So that void was filled historically by animal sacrifices. If a person did a sin, so they figuratively, spiritually, whatever the word is, they processed the cleansing of that sin through this intermediary, through the animal, right? You did a sin, the animal took your place on the altar, and the animal was killed instead of you, and you gained atonement. And that all made sense to these Christian ministers. Probably 20 odd years ago, maybe. I don't know. I came across the story in notes I had saved, and I didn't have any source for it. So then they were explaining to him how they have Jesus who serves as this intermediary, right, for all of the mankind who are born as sinners. So Jesus is there to fulfill that process. So they could not comprehend the fact that we don't operate in this way anymore, and they could. Pardon me, we do, but that's exactly it, Joe. That's exactly it. We don't have the Beit HaMikdash anymore, but we do have the ability to speak directly to him, and we do have the ability to get forgiveness and to get atonement. Not only to give atonement to other people who do us wrong, and that only happens between each, those individuals, but we do have that direct connection. What is it they were saying that they do? Well, they pray to Jesus, and that is what fills that void. We don't have an intermediary per se. We some of them weren't. You're right, but the way that they had interpreted it was that it was our intermediary to gain atonement, and they could not. They just. This rabbi was saying they just couldn't get their heads around the fact that we don't do sacrifices anymore. And I just thought it was quite enlightening.
This is what I would say. Sorry. I had at Nightingale 2 Catholic priests who wanted to come to the Seder. And we went, they came. We did the religious advisor, Rafi, I don't know whether you know, he's the best showman, but he works at Nightingale. He also brought them in first.
Oh, right.
And he went through what was happening, what it was all about, key faces. And then they came. We had a lovely time with them.
We could do that.
They really enjoyed
the majority of the congregation. No, I didn't say that.
I remember going with Rabbi. The Rabbi used to be at who became the mayor. Clancy. He did a mock Seder for a non-Jewish group. I accredited it out in Kingston somewhere. He phoned me up and said, "Can you and Francis come please to back me up? I'm doing a mock Seder for Q3A or something." And we did a Seder there for I've never had that, but in this day and age, in this day and age, somebody thinks we still do something. That's cold.
My father said that his nephew heard it, that they think Jews have horns.
Yeah,
I said, that's an old one, but they really do.
But one of the sources for the horn situation is Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with Keren Or, that he had horns of light. So so that's where one of the that's where.
That's unbelievable in this century or last century that
But they still believe that the original sin was done with an apple. So
if they read the Testament, if they read what we call the Torah, which they must have done because Christians still study that, they must know that they were only permitted in the temple. And if we don't have a temple, we never have any of that sort of thing.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm just telling you the story.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable, the naivety and the lack of knowledge.
Well, maybe lack of knowledge also.
So they went
I think it's important to go into schools. It's only to go into schools and talk to them, staff or various things. And I've taken the Hammond, I've taken the Hammond here,
Mhm.
and talked to them, and it was amazing that they didn't know anything, the children, but they did, and they came out and they used to ask so many questions. And
So-
it was good that
I went last week to Hartsbourne to go and do a Purim assembly for the children there, and I didn't get a great deal. Primary. I did Hartsbourne. I didn't get a lot of time to prepare, so I chucked a few pictures onto a slideshow, which ended up being completely out of order. Not out of order, as in like out of sequence. And I just built that into the assembly. I was like, well, you know, the whole of Purim is upside down and topsy turvy. So there you go. Even the slides are out of order. And I realized as I was starting to tell them the story about Purim, it just sounds bizarre. It sounds crazy. And I must have sounded like a right, I don't know what. It's such a difficult story. That they were key stage 1, key stage 2. 6 to 10 or whatever.
Did they ask you questions?
They asked me a couple of questions. I solved the problem. I just said anytime I say the word Haman, just boo. So that kept them on their best behavior, listening in. And anytime I said Haman, they went boo. But I was thinking about it. You got to cut that bit of the story out. That bit just doesn't make any sense if I explain that. And I managed to tell them the story in 2 minutes without even mentioning the name of Mordechai. Because like once you really strip it out and put the good bits in, as it were, like it's so difficult to explain. It's so how do you explain to 7-year-olds that people wanted to annihilate a nation? So there was a very naughty man, and his name was Haman. Boo! Yeah, and Haman didn't like the Jewish people, and so anyway, we got there in the end, and I showed them the Megillah, and their eyes went when we unravelled the Megillah across the room. About 70,000. It's literally about 50% Jewish, I'd say. 40% at least Jewish, I think.
Did you seem to be teaching the Jewish ones anything they didn't know, or did they seem to know?
They all knew, and they were like, and when we were talking about fancy dress costumes, they really got into that, and they're like, yes, I will be dressing up. I dressed up last week, and then you get like one kid going like, I dressed up as a skeleton. I'm like, thank you for that valid point. But anyway, Nova, you wanted to say something.
I have a non-Jewish friend who believes that if we started making the sacrifices, the Messiah would come and everything would fall into place.
Interesting.
But because we don't,
We're holding it back.
That's how he thinks. He's not Jewish, but he feels that.
Interesting.
Would make the difference. So we have to start making sacrifices.
Interesting.
It's interesting you mentioned sequence just now, because last night we learned that if you read the Megillah in the wrong sequence, you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah.
That's right.
That was new.
That was new to you. Oh, pardon me.
Yeah, it's a sequence.
Why would I read it in the wrong sequence?
Yes, why?
Why would? Well, I guess let's say it was Purim evening, and you were just happening to just flick through the Megillah, and you're like, oh, let's see what chapter 4 says, and then I'll go back to the beginning, or maybe you arrive late in shul, and you think like, oh well, it's fine. I'll hear the Megillah here, and then I'll do chapter 4 to 10 with the shul, and then I'll do chapter 1 to 3 on my own type thing.
But is that the one where we call about assimilation? We read Ruth, or is it Shavuot?
Esther. Next week is Esther.
Oh, so we got, is it assimilation? Is that the one where she married her? No.
You mean with Ruth?
Ruth, yeah.
Well, she was non-Jewish, and then she
Is
converted.
that Purim when we read it?
No, Shavuot.
Shavuot.
Next week is Achashverosh and Esther and Haman, and he wanted to destroy the Jewish people, and there you are.
Is the mitzvah, Rabbi, to listen to the Megillah reading twice?
Yeah, once in the nighttime, once in the daytime.
There was a chap when I was living over in Gants Hill that used to come to the church, well not to us, but to the group, and he used to read the Megillah, start speed reading. He did it in 12 minutes. He read the whole of the Megillah.
Wow.
I mean, does that
would be
fulfill?
considered listening.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that fulfill the mitzvah or not?
If he's articulated every word, then yeah. If he's just gone,
So fast, it's like
It is possible. It is possible. I think my friend did it. We did an event. We did a party in Hale for like the young parents, and they weren't really there to listen to the Megillah, shall we say? But we invited them to have a quick reading of the Megillah, and I think my friend did it in about 18 minutes. So it is possible to do it quickly. I haven't timed myself yet.
We'll try.
Yeah.
If the 613 mitzvah are from the Torah, how can it be a mitzvah to read the Megillah?
How can it be well? We have a halacha. We have a halacha to hear the Megillah, and we have a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. So
it becomes it's still a mitzvah.
It's a rabbinic mitzvah, but the rabbinic mitzvahs have you're fulfilling a biblical mitzvah by listening to the rabbinical mitzvahs. So
how many times a week? It's twice on Wednesday and once on Thursday.
Once on Wednesday night and once on Thursday.
Only once on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
There was one after the.
You don't have to go to two.
No, there is one.
We're having one. Got to be careful here because this is being streamed to the world, and who knows who's watching. We'll have one, at the regular time, and we'll have a later reading as well. There's actually two later because there's a ladies' reading, and there's a quiet reading, which I guess is without all the stomping and the booing. That's for Martin.
What time is that one? That's still online.
What time is that? I can mute myself to tell you, or we can just talk about it after. Okay.
We do it after party.
So short summary of the parsha, talking about sacrifices and different loads of different sacrifices. That's Vayikra.
I must say that Martin and I go to a shiur every morning, Monday to Thursday.
With Ben Sion.
We spent the whole for 1 hour each morning. We've just done the first and second verses of this week's.
It's always the way. And so in Parsha Pearls last night, I didn't get beyond the first word. So actually, that's not true. But anyway, we got 14 verses in, didn't we? So let's go with Pirkei Avot. Let's get it up on the screen. Can I have a page number, please?
Around
569.
Around 569. Fantastic.
569.
569.
569.
We haven't finished, we were at 7 of that. And we turned over.
It's a whole list, isn't it? Yeah, we probably turned over. So we are up to number 23, but we're only going to do 23, 24, and 25 this week, and then we'll save 26.
I'm sorry, I haven't got that.
Oh, there's no numbers. There's no numbers.
Oh, right. Oh, I see the word.
We're in the list of 48.
Yeah, right, sorry.
So we're only going to get a few done today. We'll save Kabbalat Yisurin, the acceptance of suffering, and we'll do, it's probably, let's be honest, it's probably going to be one session exclusively dedicated to that, because that will take us a while, I would anticipate. So let's just make sure we're all caught up, that there are 48 traits, there are 48 attitudes, there are 48 outlooks that we are supposed to have in our approach to study, and if we have those things, then it's going to free our minds and keep us in check to be able to accumulate Torah wisdom. So we've seen a bunch of them, and we got up to Erech Apayim, slowness to anger, which on the screen is minimum of long suffering. If you remember last week at the end, we were talking about limiting ourselves to sleep and limiting ourselves to pleasure and limiting ourselves to laughter. And if you'll remember, we didn't downplay any of them, but we emphasized that they're not there to ruin life for us. They're there for us to be able to channel those pleasures. So this week is long suffering. If I
Acceptance of suffering.
no, a few before acceptance of suffering. Patience. Patience. Yeah. Like any good doctor, you need patience. So, pardon me? The Hebrew is erech apayim. Those words should sound familiar to us. But that's right, because when we talk about the 13 midot of Hashem, the 13 attributes of Hashem, so we sing Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachem Echanan, Erech Apayim. There you go. V'rav Chesed V'emet. Right. So Erech Apayim is one of God's 13 ways of interacting with mankind, in order to give us forgiveness, in order to give us atonement. So why is it important for us to have erech apayim, to have patience and slowness to anger? Why is that going to be an important thing when it comes to being able to study and to be able to study Torah in particular and to be able to amass Torah wisdom? We open that up to the floor.
Slow to anger, really. You see people getting very angry over nothing.
But why are we getting angry when we're studying anyway? What are we getting angry about?
Too difficult to understand.
So it's frustration. Frustration when you don't understand. Rita.
No, I was just going to say the same thing. I mean, if you didn't understand, as a teacher myself, if you didn't understand why the other one doesn't understand, you need patience for somebody.
Yes.
You know, it might take an hour, it might take two, but eventually you will understand.
That's right.
You need patience because you may think you understand, but there's different meanings to it, or it's deeper meanings to when you read it.
So you need the patience also to look at things from different angles and different viewpoints. Yeah, Gary.
You might have a difference of opinion with somebody you're studying with. So they may say something, you may have to be patient with them because you're thinking from a different point of view.
Is the translation actually patience or is it anger?
Well, erech apayim,
It's slow to anger.
it's to do with the flaring of the nostrils, isn't it? Your af is your nose. So your
It's more to anger. It's more to getting upset than patience. I mean, patience is a different thing.
I agree, but that's why it translated it in the book. What does it translate in your book?
so erech apayim is usually interpreted as
Martin, you have to ask a woman, a man will never.
remaining calm, being patient, slow to anger. And we talked about that a few weeks ago. If you're someone who is slow to anger but easy to forgive, someone who is quick to anger but slow to forgive. So usually erech apayim is related to the slowness, the speed at which one gets angry. Suffering people's what's the word, foolishness or whatever, so it's all to do with that. So there were other hands. Gary?
I think if we're supposed to be emulating God, and these are one of the
Traits.
traits of God, then it's obvious that this is one that we should be trying to emulate.
I agree.
Do they say that when they, when they open up, soon after they open up, don't they?
We say a few occasions. One of them is we sing about the 13 attributes. We sing that when we take the Torah out on a Yom Tov. We sing it in Slichot at Yom Kippur and the 40 days before that. So, I mean, fundamentally, what the Torah tells us is Moses went to get forgiveness for the Jewish people for the golden calf, and God said, "I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. If you understand these 13 attributes, then I can forgive anything. If you understand that God retains his relationship with us before and after a sin, that's why it's Hashem. if you understand that he is our God, if you understand that he is merciful, that he doesn't get angry, that he is full of chesed, that he is true. So if you understand all of these things about him, then he gives us
A lot of
forgiveness.
people looking at it quickly, they're all based on chesed. A lot of them are about chesed, aren't they?
Which one?
All these things, like being happy with one's lot and, loving God, loving mankind.
Oh, I see. Well, we haven't got there. Slow down, Joe. Slow down. Yeah.
Kindly heart.
It's just interesting. It's 13 pops up again. The number 13, which is meant to be lucky for a Jewish person.
Well, there you go. Sephardi. I would expect you to chime in with that. Yeah. So there's all the things that we've talked about in terms of the frustration of learning and the frustrations of teaching. And I've told the story here before. There's a Gemara about a student who had to be taught the same thing 400 times before he got it. Remember I told you that one? And the teacher was patient enough to get, and then he forgot it all again, and then he had to teach it another 400 times. So, Rita's spot on the money when it comes to being a patient teacher, and I'm sure you were the prime example of a patient. But there's another thing as well, which is having that patience and that discipline of mind to think about things and to talk things through. It will avoid hasty conclusions, which is a danger, especially in the Torah world, especially if one is in a responsible position to issue conclusions, and it can cause errors in judgment as well. If a person is not thinking straight, then they're not going to weigh up the issue effectively, and that's a dangerous thing again in the Torah world specifically, but in any discipline generally. Anger is not our friend. I had a quote here from Rabbi Beryl Wine: "Frustration is the enemy of accomplishment." So it's a good thing. But also, when one is studying and one gets criticized or one gets picked up on their opinion, so how patient are you to be able to deal with that? We've talked about the milchama of Torah, the war, the battle for truth when one is studying. But it takes a certain discipline of mind that when someone says you're wrong, that you don't just bubble up and explode. How dare you tell me I'm wrong? I'm not. You're wrong. Anyway. I'm right. You're wrong. That's fine. Number 24, Lev Tov, a good heart. No, there's no numbers, but we're on a good heart. A good heart. You need to have a good heart to be able to learn. A git and a shoma. You think that's the same thing, do you? You think that's what it's that it says? So it's interesting because on the screen here it says generosity. What does it have in your books?
It doesn't seem to follow because it says knowing one's place.
No, it says kindly heart. Joyce, it's on the first line.
Okay.
That's okay. We forgive you. We are slow to anger, and we forgive you. Good soul, decent person. So it says generosity on the screen here, and I don't know why necessarily. Might all be part of it, but so why do you need a good heart to be able to study?
You've got sympathy for people. You people I need, you go and help. You're just a good person.
Well, when you're studying, I think you need to understand other people's point of view. It's not
Nice. I think both of you are really drawing out something quite important here, which is that it's so easy to think that learning is just the accumulation of knowledge and that it's all about you. What am I getting out of it? And it's interesting, really, because if we're saying that a good heart is what you would do for other people, yeah, then it's almost like we're saying to be able to learn in Judaism also means to learn with other people, or to learn for other people, or to help other people with their learning. It's almost like it's not just about us. There's an implication of relationship being a key part of Torah study, because if I'm learning on my own, what do I need a good heart for? I can study, and on my own I can read Wikipedia, or I can read the Gemara by myself, but why would I need to have a good heart for that if we're saying that good heart is what I do for other people? So it's almost like embedded within this is an understanding that we're not doing these things in isolation. And so if you are surrounded by people when you are learning, even if it's just one person, then a good heart is going to be something that's quite vital. If you recall, about 1 million years ago, we talked about 5 students who were asked to go out into the world and see what you needed to be on the right path in life. And one of them came back and said, you need to have a good eye, and you need to have a good ear, and whatever. And one of them said, a leiv tov. And the teacher said, all of your answers are in his answer, and that's the one that I prefer the most. A leiv tov encompasses everything else. So if you want to find out more about a good heart, you'll have to go back and find that class on YouTube and watch it over again. But fundamentally, we're talking about having a soft nature, happily doing things for other people, not being jealous, not being envious, not hating people. And these are all really important parts and really important traits if you want to be able to develop in your own journey, and you want to be able to develop in your own Torah study. If I think maybe a big part of this is just having the clear head, the clarity of mind to be able to approach the issue at hand. And if you have got no jealousy, if you're able to sit in the classroom and say, I'm never going to amount to anything. Look at Rita got 100% in her test and I got 57%. Oh, she it's not fair. She's teacher's pet, and you'll never have you'll never have your own clarity of mind to be able to embrace the situation that you are in. So this is all part of the building blocks and the foundations that we have to have within ourselves to be able to embrace and to be able to tap in. Yeah.
Is this just a kindly heart whilst we're learning Torah? A kindly heart should be all the time.
Yes, it should be. It should be. But when you appreciate that, life is just the either studying or implementing of Torah, so these are the building blocks for everything.
I think that's the basis.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talk about derech eretz kadma laTorah. We talk about courtesy, respect. These things have to come before Torah, the building blocks. But you've got 48 building blocks that shape your worldview, that shape the way that you tackle everything in life. Yeah, Martin.
There's a second aspect to this as well, I believe, that it depends. A good heart is why you're studying, not to be better than anybody else, to boast and say, I know everything and you know nothing. But to have a good heart is to study for the right reasons.
So I made a note over here. I made a note over here. Should have written brackets Martin, but the Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is one of the pieces on this, and he says that it means to not begrudge other people's success. No. It's not a race. And the other side, where he wrote it in Hebrew. I wrote it in English.
They never boasted of them. That you get people in certain fields, academia, who boast of their knowledge.
Yes.
And it comes over
that's one of my big bugbears. I've spoken about it a few times here. I think
if you've got a good heart, you don't boast of your
Yeah, I'm going to come back to what you're saying because I've got a story for you. But let's go to Joy first, and then Joe.
What Martin said, not boasting, sometimes ensure when people are laying it. And they're sort of wrong. So maybe to show that they can do it and they're very efficient. However, it doesn't enable people who are following it to understand. And I don't want to question anyone's beliefs or anything like that, but I sort of why don't you slow down? We all know you can do it like that, but really and truly, I would like to follow it.
Yeah, they may not be doing it. I know, I object, I remember, I know it's in the morning, I make a point sometimes of speaking to the board because I think people don't understand that I can't keep up with it. And I find it very difficult. I lose any
I can't keep up either.
feeling to come into shore because it's too quick. I don't think they're not doing it to show off. There are people who are very quick, and I think it's up to the boy to say to them, please slow down.
I know that I personally, when are you talking about laning or davening?
Everything.
For me, I'm talking about naming.
Yeah, so I struggle because actually when the Torah reading is schlepped out, I find it really hard. So I'd always choose a quicker laning over a shorter laning. But I understand what you're saying. You need to be able to follow. You need to be able to. It needs to be clear. That's really the key is that however fast you're going, just actually say the words. And
sometimes you've got the presenters. And they're talking so fast.
you can't understand.
So at home I can put it up.
I
just find it sometimes a mango. But
when I watch things on YouTube, I always watch on at least 1.5 times the speed. I can't watch things at a normal rate anymore. But I found that it was affecting the way that I teach as well. Because the things that I'm teaching, I end up going... But anyway, but there's an amazing precedent for this lave tov. And not begrudging others and not treating it like a race and wanting to get your stuff out there and whatever. And the humility with the things that you publish. Because if you have a look in our Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, so you will find that you have the words of Rav Yosef Karo, right, who was Sephardi, and he gives us the codification of all Jewish law in all the various areas. It's up on our shelf down there, second shelf from the bottom, those black books there, that is the code of Jewish law with the commentaries, right? If you learn through most of those laws, you will find that there is I guess you could call it a gloss called the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, who lived at the same time as the Shulchan Aruch, but he lived in Krakow. And our Shulchan Aruch nowadays is incomplete without both of those authorities. And what happened was they were both working on compiling and codifying Jewish law. And the Ramah kind of, he finishes his magnum opus, so to speak, and then he gets wind that there's this other guy thousands of miles away in Israel who's also gone and done the same thing. And he was faced with a challenge now. Do I say, well, I'm terribly sorry, this is my magnum opus, this is what I have worked for years on, and by hook or by crook, that is going to be what I send out into the world? Or does he do what he ended up doing, which is taking the words of the authority of the Shulchan Aruch, recognizing that he was ruling in many instances for Sephardi communities, and what he then did is that, as the authority for Ashkenazi communities, anywhere where we might differentiate or anywhere where we might have a different tradition. So he has included his rulings in the text of the Shulchan Aruch. And that is a prime example and a great precedent where it would have been so tempting to say, do you know what? I don't care that Rabbi Karol's gone and done this. My word is the word, and they'd written the same things. They differentiate in different places, but they'd achieved the same thing. And so what we have is an amalgamation of both. And now when we learn halacha, we see the halacha as it should be. And then when there's divergence between Ashkenazi custom and Sephardi custom, so then Ashkenazim will typically rely on the words of the Ramah. Sephardim will typically rely on the words of the Shulchan Aruch of Rav Karo, and that's how they reached a compromise. And there was obviously a lot of humbling that was needed to be able to do that, because you can imagine you go and write a book and someone's gone and done exactly the same thing as you. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do, to have that leiv tov, to still let that one come to light.
Still there, governed in
Yeah, in Krakow. What's it called? Kazimierz? Is that what the Jewish ghetto called? Kazimierz? Is that right?
Yeah.
In Krakow.
There's still a kosher hotel there.
Yeah.
And the grave is there, and the shul is the only one that still has services 3 times a day. Sat in his shul, tiny little shul.
Yeah.
But be careful, because every restaurant now has the word kosher up in their
Kosher style. I'm glad you made that point, because I was going to say the same thing.
Every restaurant says they're kosher in the square.
Yeah.
None of them are.
They're all kosher style.
One boarding house hotel that
You've got to see problem in Israel as well. Not
Yeah.
in
They-
New York, if it says kosher, it's kosher. By law, no. In the state of New York, you can only use the word kosher
If you're licensed. Interesting.
And if you don't, and they are very, very strict about that, nobody uses that word in the states, the whole state of New York. You can rely, if it says kosher, it's under one of the big authorities.
I remember when I was there for the first time, and you walk past all these restaurants, and you're seeing kreplach and knedlach and all these Jewish words and all these Jewish foods in Krakow, yeah. And I mean, there's a very vibrant, culturally Jewish life over there. But yeah, it is one to look out for, that they're not licensed very often.
Don't touch.
And there was a place on the way down to Queensbury, I remember, which I always used to read the shop sign as Bobby's Fish. And I don't know if it was Bobby or whether it was like Bubby, but I always used to read that. I used to ask my parents, like, is that a kosher place? And I don't know whether it was kosher style or whether it was just a coincidence that it was Bubby's Fish. But yeah. Pardon me?
In
It happens over here as well. It happens over here. There's a lot of caterers and a lot of restaurants which are kosher style but are not licensed. Yeah.
In Spain, in our house, as you're driving along, there's a restaurant, and it's called Menorah.
Oh.
It has a big,
Not kosher.
No, it's nothing to, it's just they use the name.
Yeah. It just reminded me of another one in Manchester on the way down from Whitefield to Prestwich. There was a fish shop. I don't think they tried to make themselves out that they were kosher at all, but it said on the side of the wall, "Home of the Jumbo Cod," right? And I always read it as "Home of the Jumbo God." Anyway, we digress again.
I don't know, maybe they've got the right idea. In South Africa, there's only one picture sign.
Oh, is there only one licensee? The licensor. Interesting. That will solve a lot of problems. Certainly in Israel, there's lots of problems with certification.
Let me tell you something, a story. I was at a meeting at Sage, United Synagogue meeting, not United Synagogue meeting. A woman came. I think her name was Ross.
Yeah.
And she came
Joe.
and talked. Joe.
Yeah.
And she came and talked about what the United Synagogue does. So anyway, she puts the question on the floor, and I was the first one to put my hand up. You're going to laugh with it. First one, he said, what does the United Synagogue does? And now I'm saying, I was telling my son, but he said, that's what I would say. He said, the only thing I know, I pay my fee to be buried. This is the only thing I knew. I didn't know, oh, they do so much. I mean, she explained what they did, and you're going on and on and on. When you don't know, United Synagogue, what does it mean to you?
Mhm.
It was for me.
I think a lot of members would say that.
Yeah.
Well, in the old days.
It's a very expensive insurance scheme.
I think she came up to me afterwards, but
What was her name?
Joe Gross.
No, there's a lot of that in the United Synagogue. Lots of people, they try to educate and do things now and again. What is it? What does it mean?
One of the biggest things that the United Synagogue does is actually kashrut licensing.
Yeah, Beijing, and there's so
And
many
the
people.
best thing, who is Jewish and who isn't, halachically, and they have a whole record going back
Yeah.
hundreds of years.
Well, we can save the rest of that for the after party. Let's do one more of these. 25. Emunat chachamim. This is a biggie. Faith in the sages. No. Faith in the sages. Yeah, that's what it says on the screen as well. Faith in the sages. That means, so it says Rita, Emunat chachamim means the rabbonim.
But it means our old, our old sages, you know what I mean? Now, like the ones
Have we been talking
we
about?
did Pirkei Avot. They're the sages, aren't they?
So chachamim, wise people, you could immediately associate that with the people that we see in Pirkei Avot. Rita says it could mean the rabbis.
Yeah, that's what I thought reading this. Faith in the sages.
I've never thought that. I've always thought it as the sort of people.
Anyone else? Any more for any more?
They use the word chacham.
Yeah. The chacham, yeah.
The high ones with the authority.
By the way, I didn't know this until a few years ago. A maven is quite a widespread word for an expert, for a clever man. It's the Hebrew word maven, one who understands. Maven. So it's worked its way into secular parlance, but it's a Hebrew word, mevin. Ani mevin, I understand.
Yeah, in Yiddish it's maven.
Yeah, it's like the expert. You ask the maven. Yeah,
It's often used in a derogatory.
it is. It can be.
Someone who thinks they know. And
That's right. So back to Emunat Chachamim, faith in the sages. So don't be despondent, Rita, because it has a very wide range of interpretations, which includes both you and Joe. Exactly. So simply put, it's the belief in the tradition of halacha, the divinity of oral law, and the trust in the system of scholarship and lawmaking. Put another way, if you read the written Torah, you don't get a whole lot of detail as to what Jewish law should be. The way that we know what to do is because we have a system of oral transmission, and the faith and the trust that you put in that system, to the degree that you accept that it's also part of God's Torah and part of God's transmission, that is the simple layer of understanding of faith in the sages. That God empowered our teachers, God empowered the chain of transmission to shape what law is, and that it's a chain that dates all the way back to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And so to have that degree of certainty, that faith in that system is included in what we understand to be Emunat Chachamim, and it's integral to be able to shape your Torah outlook, and it's integral to be able to learn Torah and to embrace Torah wisdom. If you approach it from the standpoint of, oh, they're no better than me, then you might not get very far. So
when it says have faith, it doesn't mean you can't question.
it doesn't mean you can't question, But let's say you ask the question like, let's say Chazal, the sages, the Torah, whatever it is, it says, they say something. They say the halacha should be this way. And you say, I disagree. And they say, well, it's lovely that you disagree, but this is what they say. Well, I think the reason is, the reason why I think it shouldn't be like this is because of X, Y, and Z. And they say, okay, but the reason why they thought that halacha should be that way is because of A, B, C. And you say, well, A, B, C is out of date now. X, Y, Z is more applicable. We're going X, Y, Z. So there's a problem there, because that could be a lack of emunat chachamim. Because just because the reason that you're aware of is A, B, C, and you think that X, Y, Z is more relevant, there's a layer of appreciation that there might be more to A, B, C than you think. And just because you look at it through a different pair of glasses, if no one has said your opinion for the last 2,000-3,000 years, but now you're coming along in 2022 and you're saying X, Y, Z is relevant, A, B, C is irrelevant. So that's a problem for us, because the faith in the authenticity of those opinions, and the faith that just because we only know of A, B, C as an answer, there could be D, E, F as well, right? But we don't know. So if we are approaching things from a standpoint that ABC is up for discussion, and if XYZ sounds more appealing or sounds more relevant or is easier to follow, or ABC is out of date, then we have a problem. And then you just have to plug that into any. Joy's looking at me like, what the devil is he going on about? But yeah.
I'm thinking about it in terms of Reform Judaism or liberal or whatever,
Yeah.
Masoretic, and that's exactly
That could well be one of the areas where, as Orthodox Jews, we might say that they're falling short.
It's a very difficult. There are two difficult problems I have. I've always had a difficult problem in that. Why does the Torah spend 4 or 5 not chapters, 10 or 15, 20 chapters on the Mishnah in every detail? What with no names, what piece of wood, the size of what the priest wore, and for Shabbos we rely on the Rabbanon. For Kashrus we rely on the Rabbanon. 5 or 6 sedron were totally to do with the sacrifices and the Mishnah, which we don't have today, and yet we rely totally. And the other question I have is,
so let's just answer that one first. Yeah. So there's 2 ways that we can look at it. We can say Torah's out of date. It needs to be reviewed and brought in line with modern applications. Or we can say, well, if God trusted these ancient rabbis to express to us what God meant when he said to keep Shabbat, then that would be a perfect example of emunat chachamim, of understanding that this is part of the way in which God has passed on the transmission of Torah.
Could it be the exact reverse, that Hashem gave us the exact measurements and everything to do with the Mishnah, but he left the other for interpretation? And why did I'm questioning, I'm playing.
Yeah.
Well, what goes through my own mind? Why did it stop? The Rabbanim always argued with each other, and they change. And there are things we do now that would never have been done 2,500 years ago, because our Rabbanim changed, because society changed, life changed.
So this is an excellent point as well.
Things have suddenly, there's no movement after 2,000 years ago. Why?
So
our great rabbis are just as great.
Okay, so let's start just on that point alone, right? So no, I'm fine. We've got another 15 minutes. So, are we just as great? That's really the question. Are we? Yes, we're more enlightened. We're more worldly. There's more access to education. There's more access to the books. But are we actually better than the rabbis from thousands of years ago? No, you said we're just as good. Okay, so are we actually just as good? That's because that's really the point that this all stems from, and this all starts from. We said a few weeks ago that we're supposed to approach our Torah study with humility. Now we're saying that we're supposed to have faith in our sages. That we do teach that there has been a decline through the generations of the abilities of rabbis then and rabbis now. I will say this with 150% certainty. If I sat in a shir, me, Rabbi Nick, if I sat in a shir being given by Rashi, even, being given by Abaye, Rava, Hillel, Shammai, I would not have a clue what the heck they are talking about. I wouldn't be able to understand it. No, I'm not. Because you've got the great rabbis now. And I remember when I was 18 years old, I was starting out. I appreciate that. I was starting out, and there was a rabbi who came to my yeshiva. He was one of the Rosh Yeshivas of Yeshiva University. His name is Rav Herschel Schachter. He's actually going to be in England the weekend of Shabbat UK with Mizrahi. So he came to speak in my yeshiva, and he started speaking, and I did not understand a word of what he was saying. Yeah, he was starting with one Gemara. He was bringing in the Rashi. He was bringing in Tosfot. He was going to the Rishonim, the early interpreters. He was going to the later commentary. I couldn't follow it. And it was only many years later that I even started to understand what planet he was from. And that's Rav Herschel Schachter now. So he has a phenomenal mind. He's like an encyclopedia. He's like a filing cabinet, right? If you say to him, Parashat Vayetze, he mentally opens up that filing cabinet, takes out all of the cards, right? And he'll give you mentally everything that he knows about Parashat Vayetze. You go and ask Rav Herschel Schachter how he would fare in a Torah class given by Hillel or Shammai or Avtalion or Shemaiah, and he will say exactly the same thing as me. Right? He knows, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge, but he would, if he was reaching a different conclusion, right, to one of these rabbis, he would never issue a ruling based on his opinion if it contradicted those chachamim. So we have to ask ourselves why, because we have every Tom, Dick and Harry now coming up with an opinion that they read on the back of a cereal packet and saying that should trump what these rabbis said thousands of years ago. And I'm telling you, Rav Herschel Schachter would have so much reverence, and he would have so much humility, and would have so much faith in what these sages, and he's one of the greatest minds in our generation now, and he would say, I don't see it the same way, but there must be something that I'm missing if I'm seeing it differently, right? And that's what I'm trying to draw out. I'll come to you in a second, Peter. Right? The Gemaras talk about how these rabbis, they didn't just have an encyclopedic knowledge like Rav Herschel Schachter. They knew everything. But I can't remember where the Gemara was, but it talks about the lesser student knew every verse off by heart. Tanakh, Mishnah, Gemara, Kabbalah, the Agadatas, the esoteric teachings. They knew how to understand animals, for crying out loud. And we're saying that the rabbinic graduate of whichever modern day academy is able to come up with a contrary ruling to these people. It really gets my goat. I don't know if that's coming across, but the level of knowledge that these people had is far superior to the level of knowledge that we have now. But they were at the same level, and why shouldn't they argue with each other? You know, but for us to say that you know, Rabbi Nick Kett, right, who says, well, times have changed, and the halacha should be like this now. You know, come on, do me a favor. No, but what do you mean? We've got whole. You don't remember the Zoom Seder thing just 2 years ago? I know that this is what the rabbis of then said, but they haven't seen COVID. If they could see COVID, this is what they would say. Do me a favor. You know, you're basically saying that the way that I look at the world now and the knowledge that I have is of equal standing and of equal weight to the knowledge that they had then. If Rav Herschel Schachter didn't come out and say that this is okay, that that's okay, that whatever's okay, you can pretty much be certain that there was a reason. There was a reason for that. You know, and he's not the only example. The Chachamim that... No. I know you're not. God forbid. And I know that it's not about reform. It's not just about reform. You have Orthodox rabbis who come out with outlandish statements, right, based on their own perceived greatness, which fly in the face of other Orthodox teachings, and it creates rifts in the Orthodox world. The Zoom Seder thing wasn't a reform initiative. It was Orthodox rabbis in Israel who came out and said that it should be allowed and it's extenuating circumstances. And the rest of the Orthodox world was like, what are you doing? You know? So, pardon me? There you go. So there is something here. I think the key takeaway point is not to be cynical and skeptical of our authorities, to appreciate greatness when it exists, and to appreciate as well that, you know, we still have Emunah Chachamim today. Like Rita was saying, it's faith in the rabbis. We put our faith in the Dayanim, in the Bet Din, right? It's easy to look at the world and say halacha shouldn't be like this, but it, you know, as Dayan Lopian Zatzal used to say, any haaretz can paskin a chumrah. You know, any ignoramus can rule stringently. You know, you ask, am I allowed to do this? And, you know, just the safest answer is no, you can't do this, right? It takes greatness, it takes wisdom, it takes experience, and it takes a true depth of understanding of the world to be able to say when a leniency should be applied and when it shouldn't be applied. I'm going to take us offline and I'm going to say one more thing. So just 1 second. To all those watching, take care.